Today, we're tackling a topic that stirs up a lot of emotions: prenuptial agreements. Some see them as a smart financial move, while others think they're just a roadmap to divorce. But what's the reality? Are prenups a practical tool for protecting your future, or do they send the wrong message about trust and commitment? To help us separate fact from fiction, we're joined by our in house family law attorney, Joshua Tyson. Josh, welcome back. It's always great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Sean. Always good to be here.
Josh, some people believe that if they get a prenup, it means that they're setting themselves up for divorce. Is that true?
No, I definitely don't think so. I think you know what you've come into the marriage with and what you'll be leaving with, and that can be very beneficial to both parties. So you have a clear understanding of what expectations are from one another. So, no, I don't think you're setting yourself up for divorce in any way. In fact, I think you can build trust between the parties.
So, what I'm hearing is that a prenup can actually help strengthen a marriage by setting these clear up expectations up front.
Absolutely. You know what you're coming in with and what you'd be leaving with. If there is a large disparity in income, you can trust that this person isn't marrying you to try and divorce you later and split those assets or, take what you have put together before the two of you, form your relationship.
What's the biggest misconception about prenups that you hear from clients?
The biggest misconception is definitely that they are only for people with a lot of money or a lot of assets. You need a big portfolio to have these done. Simply not true. I think they're just as important for people who have less than people who are extremely wealthy. If you have $1 million in the bank, splitting it, you're probably going to be okay afterwards. If you've got $5,000 in the bank, once that's split, if you didn't have a prenup, you're probably going to go through that getting the divorce done itself. So very important to protect all of your assets, even possibly more so if they're more sparse.
Well, besides protecting assets, how else can a prenup benefit a couple?
Just peace of mind on what they'll have and what they'll have if they leave. Sometimes, if you are thinking about leaving and there's a concern about your financial future, having a prenup in place can answer a lot of those questions for you. So you can really take some comfort in that, in knowing what the outcome would be should you decide to leave.
So, are there situations where a prenup is highly recommended, even for everyday couples?
Yes, if one party is going to be incurring a large amount of debt, or if the two of you are going to be encouraging a lot of debt, if you own a business, highly recommended, because you don't want that person to then start trying to incorporate the business into the divorce.
So, I think what I'm hearing, and let's say, we have a lot of business owners that listen and watch our shows. If one spouse has a family business, how does a prenup help protect that?
You'll want to have that business clearly listed as a non marital asset, and any increase in the valuation of the business clearly defined in your prenup. It gives us a good opportunity to sit down, go through all of the assets, such as your business, and how that'll be broken down as far as what each party takes going forward. Because certainly, as a business owner, you wouldn't want them to be able to touch any of the property the business might own, any of the bank accounts, or really any of the value of the business that wasn't specifically contributed to by them.
So, what happens if someone comes into the marriage with a lot of debt?
If someone comes in with a lot of debt, that's generally considered non marital debt. However, debt that accrues on top of that, such as interest, can be marital and you can be responsible for a marital portion of it. We can clearly define what that's going to look like in a prenup so that you're not concerned with those types of things.
So, what are some of the biggest red flags that could make a prenup invalid in court?
One big red flag you'll be looking for is the date that it was signed. If it was signed right before the wedding date, you're looking at duress. Some other red flags you'll be looking for are grossly inequitable agreements, one where no consideration was made to the other side.
How much detail should a prenup include? Is it better to keep it simple or cover as much as possible?
I always like to cover as much as possible, no stone left unturned. We like to do financial affidavits with ours so that it's clear in the paperwork. There's been full disclosure from both sides how those assets are going to be divided. It can be entirely helpful to list out, such as if there's going to be debt incurred by one party and you're aware of that, how that's going to be done, such as student loan debt. If you're going to be working while they're going to school, that is marital debt if it's done while you are married. You don't want to be the one sacrificing all those hours, working overtime, working overnights, and the other party comes out with a much higher earning capacity while they weren't earning during the marriage, and then you're stuck with half of that debt. So this can clearly define that for you.
Well, do both partners need a couple things are just hitting my mind with that. One is you talked about doing financial affidavits. Explain that a little bit more to me.
Sure. So when you go through a divorce, the court's going to require you to do a financial affidavit. There are two different types depending on what your income is. For a prenuptial affidavit, or for a prenuptial agreement, sorry, I always recommend the long form, and it just lists out all of your assets, how much there are, your bank accounts, your retirement accounts, what the current value of them are, any debts, what their current values are. Also, contingent assets and liabilities, which are assets or liabilities you may incur in the future that you're currently aware of. That way, everyone's just aware of what's there, and if there is any dispute later about whether or not something was already known at the time, you can refer back to that document and see what was disclosed.
Well, what happens if somebody doesn't isn't truthful with their financial affidavit?
So, in a regular divorce, if there is no prenup, if you are untruthful with your financial affidavit, the divorce can be reopened and a redistribution of assets be done. Florida recently took away any time frame restrictions on this, so you can be divorced 20 years, and if it's found that you lied on your financial affidavit and tried to hide assets, the other person can come back for them. And again, it doesn't matter how long it's been. If you do have a prenup and you lie on your financial affidavit, then that asset will likely be considered marital and split as if it were not in the prenup because it wasn't. And so the courts would go through the regular equitable distribution process with that.
And what exactly is equitable distribution in Florida?
Equitable distribution is how Florida divides assets and debts. Generally, it's a 50-50 split unless you can show that there is a reason that one party should not receive 50% of that, which is generally caused when one party wastes or dissipates the assets of the marriage.
So, Josh, similar to a divorce, do each party need their own attorney, or can one attorney draft the document?
Both parties should have their own attorney. Something we always put in our prenups is that each party has had the opportunity to discuss with independent counsel their rights and responsibilities under the prenuptial agreement. So there's no concerns with conflict between one uh, attorney drafting for both parties.
Well, what happens if someone signs a prenup under pressure or without fully understanding it?
So if you sign under pressure, such as the other person brings you the document right before the wedding, um, that can be considered duress, and the court can find the entire document to be unenforceable and toss it out, and you'll just have to go through the regular steps of a divorce.
It can be quite costly if that's the case.
Correct, because you'll first have to go through proving that it was signed under duress, which is its own case in itself. And then if it's thrown out, you'll then be going through full divorce litigation. So it can almost double your expenses on top of the fact that you likely paid a decent amount for your prenuptial agreement.
So let's say a couple didn't get a prenup, but later realizes they should have. Can they do anything after marriage?
Yes, we do postnuptial agreements as well. The document will look very similar to a prenuptial agreement. However, it can even be beneficial because you'll already know if you have acquired marital assets and debts, and we'll have a better idea of the position you would want to be in should you need to split them.
So let's say circumstances change, right? You've got the prenup, circumstances change, like maybe one spouse suddenly inherits a large sum of money. Can a prenup be updated?
Absolutely. We would just file an amended and add a postnuptial portion, reference it back to the prenuptial agreement, and generally we'll put language in there with all of the updates you're looking for and state that any terms not affected will be unchanged and the prenuptial agreement will still take precedent on those terms.
Since you're dealing with this all the time, what are some of your recommendations to help bring up a prenup without making it feel like a lack of trust?
Generally, you'll want to bring it up and say, we can do this, put it in a drawer and never have to look at this document again. Also, you can bring it up in a way that you want to make sure that both of you are protected and that if the other person has a change of heart, they can leave you with the understanding and knowledge of what they would be entitled to so they don't have to worry about their financial future and what it would look like in the event of a divorce.
Now, have you ever seen a prenup actually help a marriage rather than hurt it?
I have it. There's always times where that happens. You'll both know what it looks like if you were to leave, and be very encouraged to stay together. Also, another thing that we like to put in that both parties are generally on board for are infidelity clauses. Florida is a no fault state, however, the courts will enforce an infidelity clause in a prenuptial agreement. It gives both parties kind of a warm sense that they don't have to worry as much about infidelity, and if it does occur, they know the position that will put them in.
And so, what are some of the other languages that you would put into a prenup, or clauses, I should say?
So we'll have clauses for, again, as we said, infidelity. We like to put clauses for incurred debts that will benefit one party, such as student loan debt, because if one party's receiving the benefit, they should be taking that entire debt. Outside of that, we have clauses for enforceability. That should be that if one item of the document is not enforceable by the court, such as if child support or time sharing is found to not be in the best interest of the child, the rest of the document will remain enforceable. Also, that Florida law is going to dictate. That way, if you move in the future, you know the laws that were in place at the time are going to be what dictate your divorce going forward.
Well, Joshua, this has been incredibly insightful. For someone considering a prenup, what's the first step they should take?
The first step is always going to be to talk to your partner. The two of you should get on the same page about this early. Both speak to attorneys, but before you do, speak to one another so you know the questions and concerns of your partner and can go over them with your attorney when you meet.
And for our viewers and our listeners, what do you think? Are prenups a smart way to protect your future, or do they take the romance out of marriage? Let us know in the comments. If you found this episode helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Attorney Sean. This is Law Impact, and we'll see you next time.